Hello, everyone. Hey, Mario, I hope you're there and I hope you're doing well. I want to welcome everyone to this first session of the Harvey B. Gantt Center's Open Air Studio Visits and Artist Conversations. These will take place monthly. It's an opportunity for us to go into artist studios and get to know them virtually. I know we're all dealing with a new world right now, and this is a great way for us to continue to be connected to artists and continue to have access to the great work that they're making. Throughout this evening's discussion, I just want to encourage all of you to ask questions throughout the program. There's a chat function for those of you familiar with that. Hopefully we can get some great questions going on. And I'm just excited about this, and I want to introduce you all to Mario Moore, an artist who I've gotten to know very well over the years. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping here and kind of give you some background on Mario Moore. So artist and Detroit native Mario Moore received his BFA in illustration from the College for Creative Studies in 2009 and an MFA in painting from the Yale School of Art in 2013. It's actually around the time I met Mario. He's participated as an artist in residence at Knox College, Fountainhead Residency, and the Joseph and Annie Albers Foundation. Mario's work has afforded him many great opportunities from multiple exhibitions and featured articles, including those in the New York Times and the Washington Post. His work is in several great public and private collections, which include the Detroit Institute of Art and the Studio Museum of Harlem. I personally have had the great pleasure of working with Mario on a number of projects over the years, and I'm honored to do a virtual studio visit with him today. And Mario, I want to welcome you to Open Air. And on behalf of the Harvey B. Gantt Center, I just want to say we're very grateful for your participation.
Thank you. I'm happy to be a part of this and participating, of course, digitally, right, as the original plan. But we do what we can. But I'm excited to participate, and I want to say, this will be interesting because not a lot of people get to see what's going on in my studio. So I'm excited.
Yeah, so, I don't want to bury the lead here. So I'll just lead by saying that I'm aware that you are actually back in Detroit now after spending a significant amount of time, first in New York City, then at Princeton University. So I want to talk a little bit about that journey because there's a lot to cover, of course. So why don't we just kind of go back in time a little bit and let's talk a little bit about being back in Detroit before you came to New York City. Tell me a little bit about your upbringing and sort of your inspirations as an artist. Why don't we start there? That'd be a good place.
Yeah, so Detroit has always been a creative space for me. You know, it's home, but my mother's an artist. So as a kid, I would, you know, often be with her around 2 years old. When she was at College of Creative Studies, studying fine arts, she often had me and my older sister with her. Majority of the time it was me. But I remember walking through the studios, you know, smelling oil paint, all the stuff that you shouldn't be doing at, you know, when you're that young. But that was the situation. And I think what really inspired me was the idea to see her and her friends, you know, go from a blank canvas or an idea and then create a sculpture or make something out of nothing. And I thought that was really incredible. So for me, it started from my mom, and then you know, just veered when I started to read more art books and look at more artists, and also the influence of her friends, her artistic friends in Detroit.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, it goes without saying that when a young man or woman, you know, says to their parents, you know, I want to be an artist, that's going to be met with very different reactions depending upon who the parent is. But because your mother is an artist, then I'm sure that there was a much more sort of like welcoming and nurturing acceptance of that desire than it might be traditionally in, you know, in other situations.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because like my decision in undergrad was to study illustration, you know, because I saw my mom's friends and my mom making artwork. And at that time, you know, kind of selling some things, but not really making a lot of money. And my whole thing, especially, you know, graduating what in 2008, 2009, during the recession, right? My thought process was like, I need to get a job. I need to make some money. So I pursued a undergraduate degree in illustration, and I
Right.
ended up finding out I didn't like, you know, working for people or somebody telling me what to make when it came to my artwork. But my mom has always been supportive, and even my dad. My dad, even till this day, right? He's a hardworking guy. He understands it, but at the same time, he'll be like, "Hey, there's this curator job at this museum," and I'm like, "Nah, I'm trying to get in the museum. I'm not trying to curate the work for the museum, you know." So there's still this, like, he understands it, but he still has this position, like, "Wait, you need a paycheck every 2 weeks," like.
Well, I mean, it's an understandable thing. I mean, I think that one of the things that became clear to me when I started working in the art world was how much I didn't know. Right?
Mhm.
You know, it just becomes clear to you. You have these assumptions about how things function, and then all of a sudden, you know, you realize, wow, I was just completely off base about that. So, you know, let's fast forward a little bit to around the time you and I met. I met you 2012. I want to say
Mhm.
13 because I think you were still at Yale but hadn't quite graduated, so it must have been 12, 13. And you know, look, going from Detroit to New Haven, where Yale is, had to be a bit of a culture shock. Let's call it that. What was that? What was that like for you going from Detroit to New Haven?
Well, you know, the interesting thing is New Haven as a city itself has a lot of similarities, I would say, to a city like Detroit. It's has a large Black population, but of course, the difference is the Yale bubble. So that experience was very different. I think for me, you know, my mom would often take me to a lot of lectures, talks. So I was very familiar with the collegiate space, you know, and what that looked like. But when it came to Yale Art School, the Yale Art Program, there was a lot of things I did not know. For example, I remember doing the interview, and during the interview process at Yale to get into the school, A lot of friends of mine really good people that became friends of mine were doing the interview as well, and they were talking about, hey, that's that person, and hey, you got an interview with this person, and oh my gosh, that's I didn't know anybody. I didn't go in with any expectations or understanding of this aspect of the art world or contemporary artists or critics or professors. So I went in with just understanding that this is a human being and I'm just going to talk about my work. But for them, they were like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous because I'm talking to XYZ. I had no idea who I was
Right,
talking
right.
to.
They carried all that baggage with them into the process, and yeah, that baggage can be really heavy, man. A little bit of naivete goes a long way. I gotta say, if I wasn't like woefully naive, there's no way I would have entered the curatorial role because I would have just been too intimidated by all of those people, those faces, those names, right? Like knowing all those names, and that's a hard thing to carry, So so as an artist, kind of, you were at the College of Creative Studies, then you're at Yale. You're kind of fine tuning what you want to do and what you want to, express as an artist. Can you tell me if there was any significant change between how you went about making paintings before and after those experiences?
I would say, like, for anybody that's in grad school or has been through grad school, um, it causes you to overthink everything. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, right? I feel like before grad school, I had this very innocent freedom to just make, and I would just make a lot of stuff, right? And it was just coming out. Like paintings were just coming left and right, sculptures, all different kind of things. And then once you get into theory and you get into examining why you're making something, how you're making something, what is the reason that you decided to become an artist? All these kind of things flow into the work in a different way. I would say the greatest thing that I took away from my time at Yale was my friends, other students who became friends with me from the grad program, but also the way that I approach painting. Painting for me is a lot more open now, and not in the way of the freedom that I had before grad school, but in the way that I construct a painting, meaning I allow the painting to kind of navigate itself without having such a rigid hold or structure on what I want it to end up looking like.
Right, right. And so post Yale, some time goes by. Obviously, that was 2013 when you got out of Yale. And so the next time you and I reconnected, with the exception of maybe some projects we might have like talked about over the years, but the next time you and I like reconnected, you were at Princeton doing this fellowship. Which I was like sort of surprised because I live in New Jersey, so it's like, oh yeah, well Myra's in New Jersey. What the hell are you doing? You doing in New Jersey? So talk about that. I mean, a lot came out of your time at Princeton. I mean, I think that, maybe I might be overstating, but I feel like that was a turning point for you.
Yeah, I think it was. It was a lot of light that was shined on the work that I was doing, and almost, granted, coming to the very end of that exhibition or the very end of my fellowship, and that was because an alumni news reporter saw this in an alumni magazine and decided that she wanted to talk about it. And I'm really grateful for Diaz, CBS, which was really, really amazing. But I think I agree with you that it was a kind of huge story that kind of just went everywhere. I mean, it kind of exploded and everybody was talking about it. But for me, the dramatic change that happened before Yale was after I had brain surgery and I had a residency at the Joseph Annie Albers Foundation. That kind of put together this huge show that was about restoration and about rest for Black men. And that to me kind of pointed me in a new direction because I had a new kind of take on just existing in this world in America. And it changed my work in a good way, right? That kind of pushed me forward. But definitely the whole Princeton Harder Fellowship experience really just exploded everything.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, we want to shift into doing this real virtual studio visit, right? So you're in a new space in Detroit. Before you kind of take us around the room a little bit, can you tell us like where you are? Because I remember a couple of weeks ago, well, man, maybe it was a month ago, you and I talked, you're like, yeah, I'm going back to Detroit. I'm opening up a studio there. And you started telling me some of the things you're going to do. So now here you are. Can you tell us about where you are and then kind of give us a little bit of a tour?
Yeah. So I decided to move back to Detroit. One, because I want to be here with my family. My grandmother's getting older. I have a niece and a nephew, and I feel like it's a really good time just to, be close to family. So that was the first choice. But the primary choice was I've become established enough where I don't have to live in New York or be on the East Coast or the West Coast. So for me, the best place to create is wherever you want. So that's Detroit for me right now. The second decision, the biggest decision, was that eventually I want to open up either a foundation or a residency here for young Black artists in Detroit. And I'm looking to build on that and build upon that. But right now I am kind of close to downtown in Detroit, in a nice studio. Love it. I have AC. It's crazy. That's not something you really get, in a lot of places, right? But yeah, I'll show you around, so we can take a look. If you have questions as we go.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, well, let's begin where we are, right? So there's a new work behind you. Well, it's new to me. Can you talk about the work that's here, right on the wall?
Yeah, so this piece actually was planned for a show in New Orleans at the Arthur Roger Gallery, and it was supposed to be in October. It was supposed to happen around the same time as Prospect.
Right.
And of course, that date has been moved back, like everything else, because of COVID. But for me, coming off of the Princeton exhibition and the Hodder Fellowship, I started to dig really deep into family history. And I found out that my great uncle fought in the Civil War. And I started to just really kind of dig through the family historical crates, right? And I was talking this is a painting of Mark Gibson, by the way, an amazing artist, a friend of mine. We both went to grad school together. But me and Mark like a lot of the same art. We like Peter Paul Rubens. We like a lot of American history. We like kind of digging into what is America and what that history looks like. So I talked to him and I asked him if he would be interested in posing for a painting. And I'm actually going to do another painting. I'll show you that canvas, probably the biggest one that's in the studio, but it has nothing on it. But the plan for me and him was if I could launch him this idea and ask him, hey, would you be interested in doing this drawing based on the Battle of Antietam? And the Battle of Antietam was the deadliest battle in the Civil War, deadliest battle in American history on American soil, right? You had losses on both sides, Confederates and the Union. And it was also the battle that led to Lincoln's decision to put forward the Emancipation Proclamation. So that decision, what that little win that happened with that battle was a win that Lincoln needed to kind of get rid of foreign powers who were almost in the decision to side with the Confederates and give them support. So it was a kind of huge outcome. Even though it was really deadly on both sides, it gave him enough push to push that forward. So I asked Mark if he would do a drawing based on that battle. So he did a drawing, and I told him I would like it to be kind of reminiscent of those battle paintings that we like, really specific one of Peter Paul Rubens at the Met. And he was like, yeah, I'm definitely down with that. So he did that, and from his drawing, and our styles are very, very different, I created another drawing based on his drawing, and then I made this painting. So that's what you see.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah, wow.
And then just, digitally, you don't really get to see all this, like the texture in the face and all that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to show that too. Because that's what we're missing right now, you know, being able to see artwork in person.
So you know, let's go to the next canvas there.
So this one is a work in progress. Let's see, I'll back up.
Right.
I'll move all the way back here. And it's pretty much dealing with the same concept about the Civil War, but it's also connecting that history.
Let's stabilize your laptop a bit because it's doing the GoPro thing right now. There you go.
So it's connecting the Civil War history to what's happening today. So economically, politically, those distinctions. So in this painting, I have my niece and my nephew. They're watching TV, and the movie they're going to be watching is Glory. And I'm going to take an excerpt from that film, a specific scene, and then also put some newspaper or something like that on the floor describing what's going on right now.
Wow, fantastic.
So it's like a beginning.
And what about this work here? I saw this on Instagram. I was curious about this painting here.
So this piece, these two pieces, actually, nobody has seen this other one until now, right? The one on this side is in progress, and this one's pretty much almost done. But this is another thing dealing with family history. I'm curating a show here at the David Klein Gallery titled Familiar, and it's really examining different portrayals of Black history or family or friendship in a way that most people have not seen, or from an outside perspective might seem different. So I found out from visiting my great aunt that our family owned a restaurant in Detroit. I had no idea, no clue whatsoever. So it was owned by my great granddad, and it was called RJR Snack Bar. The whole family moved from Tennessee to Detroit and opened up this restaurant. So just give you a close up. This is actually my great grandma. This is my grandma. And then this is my granddad. I've never met him, but this is before him and my grandma got together. So you see him kind of creeping around in these old images that I found, which is really funny. And for me, it's about thinking about the effect that COVID's going to have on Black businesses, and also about what was happening in the 50s, the 60s, when it came to Black-owned businesses, and also the destruction of those businesses by running freeways through them or different things like that. It's like, what will our outcome be after what's happening right now with Black-owned businesses who are not receiving the loans from the government, who are not receiving the loans from the banks, often having to depend on themselves. So what I'm working on right now is basically an empty restaurant in full color. And I'm kind of getting the notes of color from my grandma telling me that was brown, medium brown leather, that was this color, that was this color. So I'm kind of creating that, you know, for my imagination at the same time, but using it to really think about what would it look like today, but also with the lack of people, right? With the important people and element of that work, what does that mean? Like how do we consider that in today's time?
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, and the fact that you're able to get that oral history is really good. We could stabilize now and sit down, and maybe we can go through the presentation that you have. Unless there's one more work there on the easel you wanted to talk about. It seems very interesting from here.
So this piece is a work that I'm also working on for a group show at that my friend Austin Lee is putting together in New York. So I'm working on that, and this again is thinking about the Civil War. This is actually an image, the only image that exists of my great uncle, and I believe it was taken when he was probably much older, to kind of celebrate their victory. But in terms of this like still life, this will be a mirror with a reflection of me. But I'm always thinking about how to talk about history and the cyclical kind of logic of how we keep kind of existing in the same spaces. We keep going over some of the same things that we've already been through, but how to compare those two things. This is the still life right here.
Right. So it's kind of like an interesting opportunity to see how you go about staging something in order to use it in a painting. That's fantastic. So you mentioned New York. That work is being prepared for a show in New York. We did have a question that came in. I'd love to run it by you. It's a great question. Do you think it's possible to live in New York City as an artist?
I do think it's possible to live in New York City as an artist, but to be 100% honest, I think you, well, it depends on the individual. So I'll say this. Going to Yale, my expectation, and I think of a lot of people's expectations when they go to a program like Yale, Columbia, Cranbrook, those kind of major schools, that you are going to come out and you are going to, just make it, and you are going to be in all the shows. Everybody's going to be talking about you, right? But the reality of that is very few that are chosen, that are kind of taken through the pipeline, through the gallery system, and immediately become these huge artists, right? I think for the majority of artists coming out of any grad program, not just Yale, you will have to work. You have to work outside of making art. I had so many jobs in New York. I was a weekend program coordinator at an arts nonprofit. I had a full-time job at another arts nonprofit. I was a muralist. I worked many different jobs, and my studio was in my apartment. And it was like that for a very long time. And for me, it didn't matter. I was still having studio visits. I was still making work. But if a director of a museum wanted to come give me a studio visit, I would tell them, hey, my studio's in my bedroom. And, that had to be okay with them. But I think the decision that you make to move to New York and make work there is that more than likely you're going to have to struggle a little bit, and you're going to have to really, really, really push yourself. And there's something that Kerry James Marshall said, and I feel like it's so true. He's like, no matter the circumstances, economically, mentally, whatever it is, you have to make your work. And I was making work out of my bedroom, right? And that was my studio. And I was, still in exhibitions, still having shows, still doing what I needed to do. But for me, over time, it just didn't make sense. I would look at, walk down the street, and the building would be like $4 million. And I'm like, you know what you can get for $4 million in any other city? You're talking about like 5 mansions. What,
yeah, truth be told, I mean, New York real estate, and you can say this maybe about 2 or 3 other cities, it's not tied to any sort of like real logic. It's based on a whole different economy and unto itself. So right. Just so in the interest of time, I'd love for us to get into the samples of work that you have in the slide presentation, so we can talk about some additional paintings. And then I have a couple of questions I'll run by you as we go through that presentation.
Okay.
So great. So maybe you can, talk us through each piece and give us at least, some background on the work.
Yeah. So this piece I made while I had this residency at Knox College, which is in the middle of Illinois. It was a great opportunity for me. I think it was in 2015. And it was like the first real artist residency that I had. And, at that time, you were just dealing with a lot of the deaths of Black men and women at the hand of police officers, as you are today. And the first images that I would see go up in the news media and what was portrayed is the mourning Black mother. And for me, I thought about the women in my family and what their experiences would be, or what their reaction would be to the possibility of my death, or a cousin, or a brother, or something like that. And knowing my grandma, who's an education activist in Detroit, she would be very, very upset. Of course, she'd be sad, but I think there would be a revolutionary action that would happen. So instead of showing the mothers holding images of their murdered sons, I wanted to show moms holding images of their living sons, in a sense of protection and care that I see in my family. So This is actually my mom, and this is an image of me, I think graduating kindergarten or something like that, moving to the first grade. And this is all painted on copper. It's about 5 feet by 3 feet, I believe. And the idea of the copper surface was at once to use as a reflection source. So whoever sees the painting sees a reflection of themselves, but they're also, the image of themselves is veiled, right? So they're looking at a copper, a bronze, kind of tone to their face. So
Right.
it's a way of getting somebody into the narrative and almost physically changing them as they're looking at the painting.
And you mentioned that this is on copper, and that leads me to a question about the materials you use. Do you paint using oil or acrylic or both?
I paint mainly using oil. That's pretty much all I use. I think in undergrad, I did a lot in acrylic. And I think acrylic is actually really good if you want to learn how to paint because it teaches you speed. And I paint really fast. And I think that's because of the kind of learning with acrylic, but all my paintings are oil. And specifically, using copper, that came from a visit, a tour that I was able to do with another class at Yale where we went to the Met. And they were taking us around the museum and they were looking at this one really, really small painting by Peter Paul Rubens. And it was called Young Scholar. And it was really small and it was painted on copper. And he just briefly mentioned, he was like, you can also paint on copper directly on the copper surface. And I've always been interested going through Dutch galleries and seeing paintings by Rembrandt and many other artists which are on copper, but a lot of people don't know it unless they, read the little detail. But I thought about the idea of double consciousness and W.E.B. Du Bois about the veil, right, and how I could use copper to also talk about this idea.
Fantastic.
This is another piece that I did at Knox College, and the title of this piece is PTSD for a Lifetime, it seems. And, usually when we think about PTSD, we think about post-traumatic stress syndrome, right? Usually associated with war. But there was this historian, Dr. Joy Leary, who came up with the term post-traumatic slave syndrome. And listening to her and hearing how she was explaining it became really, really interesting. Because I think there are certain histories and certain ways that we navigate the world that we're still dealing with this history. And one example that she gave was when a mother is, or two mothers, you have a white mom and you have a black mom with their children. They're walking around the mall. The white child might have a lot of freedom, kind of, just being a free kid, doing whatever is necessary. And you have a black child who tries to, walk away. I know my mom's done it for me. I used to try to hide in the clothes in the store, in the clothes racks and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll get yelled at afterwards or pulled close, like, where you going? And she said she asked, these moms, like, where'd you get that from? Why do you do that? And well, that's what my mom did to me. And, as you keep going down the road, that's what my mom did to me. You keep going, you get back to a historic moment where Black families were pulled apart, right? By slave owners, right? By selling those slaves. So we're still dealing with a lot of those histories that we haven't really stomached yet. So for me, I use this white American bulldog as a symbol of America itself. It's bred from the British bulldog. And I think about, colonialism when the British came over. And for me, you often see this dog in my paintings, probably sleeping, laying down, often ignoring some huge issue that's happening right above it. So the boy essentially probably drew this painting here, and you see there's a man or a boy that's running away, and the cop is shooting that boy in the back, right? Which we've seen many, many different times, right, through video. But there's also the implementation of Black communities and churches being in existence, and the liquor store that's always there. So this kind of just allows you to navigate the painting, I think, in an interesting way. And often I'm really interested in how to get people into an image, right? For them to be able to explore it literally almost with their bodies So usually my paintings are really big, and it allows you to kind of navigate the space.
Wow, wow, fantastic.
This piece was the first piece that I did after having brain surgery in 2017. So I had a seizure, and then I had a awake craniotomy. And afterwards, I would say maybe probably not even a month, I started this drawing. And what I was realizing after that surgery was I was forced to rest, I was forced to relax. My body couldn't do much of anything. And I had to really consider the idea of what rest and relaxation looks like for myself. And then thinking about myself, I started to think in general of Black men and historical Black men. So I started Googling all these images of, let's say, Martin Luther King relaxing or Malcolm X sleeping. And I wasn't able to find much of anything. I always found the more boisterous type of images of them on panels, or yelling or screaming, or even somebody like W.E.B. Du Bois or James Baldwin. But as I started to dig deeper, I started to find these images. And I'm like, at some point, they had to go on vacation. At some point, they had to spend time with their families. At some point, they had to take a break.
And it's funny you should say that. I saw an image of Martin Luther King just relaxing in a pool. It's probably been seen by millions of people. But a few years ago, I came across it, and it was just startling to see someone who's been so sort of canonized in a particular way, to see them, more or less just chilling.
Exactly. And I think I only began to think about it because my body was forced to rest. I'm so used to working, I'm so used to making, that it's something that I honestly did not do. And I make sure I take time now to do it because of this experience that happened to me. So I started thinking about these historical figures. And one of the first ones that came to me was revolutionary boxer Jack Johnson. And I started to pin these historical figures with me posing next to them or below them in a relaxed state, letting my body relax and rest while they do the heavy lifting, while they do the work. So this is also a really well-known kind of pose, because you can see the image on many album covers. You got Michael Jackson, Teddy.
Yeah. There's something strikingly familiar about the pose.
Exactly. If you see that image, it's going to be a good album. It's going to be an amazing album.
So I have a question about the work prior to this. You don't need to go back, but just in terms of if you don't paint and you don't draw, and I don't paint and I don't draw, it's almost impossible to imagine how long it takes one to create a drawing like this or a painting like the prior work. So the painting with the American Bull, the dog in it prior to this, if you don't mind, how long did it take you to complete that painting?
So I'm usually working on multiple pieces at a time, as you can kind of see in the studio now. But I would say it would take me probably about 3 weeks for a piece. And that's kind of navigating, back and forth between two. If I have a solid time to just work on one, probably about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Like I said, I paint really fast, and this drawing in particular, this is actually silver point. And if you don't know for people who don't know what silver point is, it's a really, really old technique that was used in the 15th century and before, and was used by scribes, and was before the invention of graphite. Leonardo da Vinci used it, a lot of artists used it, Dürer used it. And as I would walk through the museum, I would see silver point, but I had no idea what it meant.
Wow.
So as I explored more what it was about, it was literally drawing with a piece of silver on a prepared piece of paper. So I like the idea that you can only go to a certain value with silver point. You can't get too dark. There's only a certain shift. So I like the idea that whatever I draw is going to have a certain softness to it. And also that I'm leaving behind a trace of silver. So for a material, I'm thinking about how I can imply value into something or into a people that America doesn't see as valuable.
Wow. And There's a couple of questions that have come in. You can move on to the next slide, but I want to address a couple of the questions before you go on and explaining, what we're looking at here. Because I think this is a good one. I mentioned that I had seen one of the earlier works you showed in your studio. I think I saw like a snapshot of it on social media. So in this day and age, with Instagram and other forms of social media, how important or valuable do you think social media is right now for an artist in their career?
I think especially today it's extremely valuable, but I also think the importance of seeing the painting in person, it can't be supplemented. There's no way, especially the kind of painting that I do. A lot of people see my work online and they see it in this very flat way. There's a lot of texture to my paintings. There's a lot of information to gather when you see it in person. And no matter what I post, unless I post an extremely detailed image, it's nearly impossible to understand the painting that you're looking at and the way that it kind of encloses you or the way that it surrounds you in real life. There's just no comparison versus seeing it in person. But as far as taking control of your own studio practice, taking control economically of what the potential can be, social media has definitely helped a lot of artists, and I would say it's definitely helped me in reaching people that I would never have reached before.
Right. So can you briefly tell us what's happening in this work? We'll go to the next one. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so this piece is titled A Student's Dream, and it's taken basically, I think I would say 4 months before I had a seizure that led to the brain surgery. I literally had a dream, and I woke up in the middle of the night, drew a sketch, which is something I never do. It's something I never do. A sketch of these men standing above a body. And I wrote it down and I said, this is a very large painting. I have no idea what it's about. And that was my note. Forgot about it, didn't pay attention to it. And then post-surgery, I go back in my sketchbook, I'm just looking through things and I find it and my mouth drops. I'm shocked. I'm like, this is crazy. But also at the same time, I just finished reading probably a year ago, prior to 2017, a book called Medical Apartheid. And it talks about the experimentation on Black bodies from slavery to contemporary times in the prison system. And there was some really kind of daunting and terrible things to find in there, but also some incredible history to explore. So then I found myself at Strand's Bookstore in New York, and I find another book, and it's about early American medical practice through photography. So in these photographs, you have medical people in the early 1900s standing over these cadavers, doing things. And the interesting thing is, in early American medical history, when it comes to medicine, people were just kind of doing stuff. They had these places called medical schools, but it would be like a building and a couple of guys, right? It really, really crazy. But overseas, because let's say in Europe, you had to go through 8 years of practice, even in the 1900s, before you became a doctor. But here it was a very new thing. So what I found in those images is I found a lot of Black cadavers over and over again, laying on kind of the slab as these medical professionals were experimenting on the bodies or examining them or using them for anatomy or whatever the case was. And also in that time, you had people called grave robbers, you had grave snatchers, you also had body snatchers, meaning you could be alive walking around Johns Hopkins and somebody could snatch you up and kill you to use you as a medical experiment. So as I'm looking through the book, there's one kind of funny image of the photographer laying on a slab and skeletons standing around him. And a lot of photographers during that time did this, and it was called A Student's Dream. And the concept was to imagine what it was like to be the body on the table instead of the cadaver that's usually there. So even though it was a parody, I saw a level of insight and a level of compassion in that image. So that's what I use as a source for this painting.
Great. So we're coming to the point now where we want to do a Q&A. So maybe we can just take a moment on this particular work, and then I want to jump into some questions that have come in.
Yeah. So this piece also built off the idea of rest and relaxation. I did this series of paintings of friends and family that I knew that were in love with their significant other. And I wanted to show, I started off with who I thought the most famous Black couple was, and it was Michelle and Barack Obama. So I started off with Barack, and I used the image from the second inauguration where him and Michelle are dancing. And I decided to, in thinking about this idea of resting or renewing, what are some of the ways that Black men rest and renew? They tell their loved ones secrets. They get weight off their chest by talking to somebody that they love. So each title of each of these works is titled for the significant other. So the title of this piece is To a Monumenter.
Fantastic, fantastic. So now that was really great, Mario. I want to thank you. I mean, you're so generous with your time, and I know making a painting is one thing, talking about it is entirely different, entirely different thing. But that's one of the things, I guess, you also have to do when you're in an academic environment. So one of the questions that came in is, why did you choose Yale for your MFA, and do you think it was a valuable experience?
So I chose Yale because when my mom was at CCS, she had a really good friend, still has a really great friend named Richard Lewis. And my first time painting in oils was asking my mom if I can go study with Richard Lewis for a summer. I think I was between 10th and 11th grade. And he was showing me how to paint in oils. We were standing, looking at a still life. I'm working on my painting, he's working on his painting. Every time I turn around to see what he's working on, I'm like, I'm doing something terribly wrong because mine does not look like that, But he's a really, really incredible artist. And I find out as I'm working with him, and I've known him all my life, that he has a diploma on the wall, a degree from Yale. I had no idea that he went to Yale. I also found out he was an artist in residence at the Student Museum of Harlem. And I think just that little image or the idea of the possibility of that was like, oh, Richard did that. Okay, I think I can do that too, because I saw somebody that I knew really, really well who was teaching me oil painting, go through this program. So ever since then, I was like, if I do go to grad school, that's what I want to do. But it came down to this. After I graduated from undergrad, Hollywood had a huge film incentive here in Michigan. So I was working on these huge Hollywood movies. Transformers was filmed here, Batman vs. Superman, and I was a set sculptor. But it took up so much of my time. So I was like, what do I need to do to just work on art all the time? And I did not want to go to grad school, but grad school was the answer. So immediately I knew the places that I were going to apply to. I applied to Yale, Columbia, MICA, and Cranbrook. I got in everywhere except for MICA. And once I got into Yale, knowing Richard, the decision was closed.
Right. Well, speaking of schools, someone also asked, about teaching. Many artists teach in high schools or colleges. Have you ever taught in the past? Do you think you'll ever go in that direction and teach?
Yeah. So I started teaching actually at a really young age. While I was still in undergrad, I was teaching summer programs at the YMCA for high school kids. And it's just been something consistently that I've done. And in the beginning, I didn't like doing it. But collegially, I taught a class that I put together at Knox College in Illinois. I've taught at Rutgers, New York, and also taught a class at Princeton. And I really, really enjoy teaching. And I think for the most part, if you go get your MFA, if you pursue to go get your MFA, the idea right off the back is a lot of people have in mind that more than likely they'll be teaching, because that's usually the requirement to teach at a university is to have an MFA. And I enjoy handing down things that I've learned to younger artists. So I like the idea of teaching. But at the same time, my studio practice is my primary, that's what I'm doing. So I make sure while I'm teaching that it works around my artistic practice.
And speaking of your artistic practice, someone is curious to know, why do you work on multiple paintings at the same time?
Deadlines. Deadlines. It's also just because the way that I create, usually I come up with an idea, like for this exhibition that's dealing with the Civil War, comparing it to what's happening today. And this was before COVID. This was before all the kind of political turmoil that we're going through, specifically dealing with the situation today. But the title of that exhibition, it's still going to be A New Republic, because it was supposed to happen actually during the time of the election. And at that point, we would, see what was going to happen with the president, right? But the idea was, this was the kind of the beginning, the source of this painting. And then what happens is, as I work on one thing, it leads me to another thing. And I kind of, if I get bored with something, I'll set that aside and then work on the next thing. Because I also always want to be engaged with the painting. Otherwise, the paintings just turn out really, really terrible. So I jump back and forth.
Someone is also, curious. You touched on this a little bit, actually, with the first work in your studio. You mentioned some of your painters that are influential to you. Who are some of the artists that you really admire? They can be, young or old.
So probably one of the tops is Kerry James Marshall, contemporary-wise. Richard Lewis, who I've told you about. And there's some friends too. Jennifer Packer, I love her paintings. If you don't know who Jennifer Packer is, look her up. I really like the intellect and the way that Mark Gibson approaches art, which I think is really incredible. And then everything after that, for the most part, goes old school. Velasquez is number one over everybody. Just the way that he approaches painting. And I think it's something about his paintings, and that he makes you believe in the magic of paint. It's something that looks so simple. He tells you how he's doing it, right? And then when you try to approach the way that he's doing it, it does not turn out anything like what he's doing. So I think it's something really, really incredible about that. And that's what I love about painting, is the material aspect of paint, chunks of paint, things like that, that can kind of trick the eye into believing that something else is going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a physicality to painting that is easy to miss, especially when you're looking at it digitally, right? I mean, it's so much about how we interact with art today that's digital and virtual. I mean, thankfully we're actually able to do this, right? I mean, all things considered, we wouldn't know what you were up to if we weren't able to do this. But to sort of connect with something you said earlier, there's something about standing in front of a painting, like in real life, in real time, that is so much more rewarding than seeing an image of a painting. And in fact, I believe what I'm about to say. I'm certainly not the person that coined this, but I don't think you've actually seen a painting until you've stood in front of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I really do believe that. And famous paintings and not so famous painting. I remember going to the Louvre for the first time and seeing the Mona Lisa and having a completely different read and reaction on the painting. Just to use it as an example, a well-worn example, but an example nonetheless. So we're coming down to, toward the end here, and before we, start, sort of like wrapping up, I just want to talk a bit more about this moment in time that we're living in. I mean, I know that going back to Detroit was, good for you for the reasons that you expressed, but how has it been there? I mean, can you just take literally a minute and just talk about like what the vibe and the climate is in Detroit right now around everything that's happening?
Yeah, so I was in Princeton for 2 years, one for the fellowship, and then I decided to teach there afterwards. And I was in New York before that, in Brooklyn. So I've been away from Detroit for a total of 10 years. I haven't lived in Detroit, and now I'm back. Of course, there's a lot that is happening in Detroit pre-COVID. There's stuff that's still happening. Right, it's slowing a lot of things down, like it's slowing things down everywhere around the nation. And I stay in touch with my friends in New York. And I honestly could not imagine being in New York right now. I just couldn't imagine. And the thing is, not just because of the expense of New York or the pace of New York or things like that. There's things about New York I love so much, and you can't compare it to any other city. But when it comes to things that I loved about Detroit before leaving, there was so much freedom here that I had, meaning like you can just make stuff, you can kind of explore buildings, you can just do stuff that you can't do anywhere else, right? What I'm also seeing though is there's a hindrance in people, you know, wanting to go to bars, people without masks on. I think that's happening in a lot of places. When I was at Princeton, there wasn't too much of that. It's a
Right.
suburb, so you really didn't see a lot of that.
Right.
But yeah, now things are almost at a regular pace, meaning, you know, cars are out and about. I remember when COVID first happened, my studio was about 15 minutes away. When I was living in Princeton, I was like the only car on the road. It was like literally the only car that was going
Right.
anywhere.
Right.
And now it's just like, you know, like back to a regular function, even though the difference now is mass and people maintaining their social distance.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
No, well, that's interesting. So, um, what's on the horizon? So this is my last question for this fantastic conversation we've been having. I mean, are you working with the gallery? Do you have a show coming up? I mean, obviously that's something that people would be curious about.
Yeah, so I'm curating a group show at the David Klein Gallery in September, which is here. The location is here in downtown Detroit, and that show it will feature these two paintings and another painting, with a lot of amazing artists. One of the artists is Beverly McIver, incredible artist from North Carolina. And many others. I'll be in a group exhibition at Jeffrey Deitch Gallery in September. So that's happening all around the same time. The exhibition, the solo exhibition that's happening in New Orleans at the Arthur Raja Gallery is moved to next year. I also have a museum survey show coming together, which will be next year also. And then a show that will be in Germany, probably 2022.
Wow.
So I mean, there's a lot going on. You know, I probably haven't named everything, but
Right.
I'm always trying to create work and just build off of what I've been creating in the studio.
Well, I really do appreciate this, Mario. I mean, it's been a joy. I learned some things about you that I didn't know. So, you know, this was really fantastic, not just for the people who were watching, but also for me as well. I want to thank everyone who tuned in for this. I want to encourage you to continue to support the Gantt Center so that they can do programs like this. Remember, this is open air virtual studio visits. We'll continue to do this every month. We'll be featuring new artists, so you have to follow the Gantt Center on social media to know what's happening, get on that mailing list. If you want to text to give to the Gantt Center, you can text unmasked to 345-345, and I'm sure it'll give you all the prompts you need to support the Harvey Gantt Center. I've been working with the Gantt Center on a number of projects over the past several years. It's been a fantastic organization to do projects with. I love going to Charlotte. I love collaborating with folks there and also getting these opportunities to talk to people like you, Mario. This has been really fun and I appreciate it greatly. Stay safe, stay creative, you know, and I can't wait to hang out with you again the next time I visit Detroit.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Dexter. Thank you to the Harvey B. Gantt Center. I also want to say Dexter was one of the first people I met that actually put me in my first group show in New York. I don't even know if he knows that, but I just want to say thank you, Dexter, for always supporting my work. The Harvey B. Gantt Center is amazing. I loved visiting it when I was able to, right? That will be coming back soon. And thank you, everybody, for joining.
All right, thank you. Have a great evening.